This tutorial will show you how to make your GoPro Protune videos pop with plugins from fcpeffects.com. We're going to be using two plugins today, the HDR plugin to help you bring out the details in the Protune video, and the finishing plugin, which will bring out the color. If you like this video or found it helpful, please subscribe to keep this channel alive. Thanks. Alright, let's get started. I have a couple videos up here. These are using GoPro's Protune. And they look, as you can tell, they look a little bit flat. Color doesn't really pop out at you or anything, but GoPro actually embeds a lot of information about the color and the detail of the video. But you have to bring it out. You could use in the built-in color tools that are already in Final Cut Pro. But I find those a little tedious and complex and cumbersome to work with. So these two plugins that I got from fcpeffects.com are the HDR and the finishing. Let's go ahead and start with the first one using the HDR plugin. Let's grab it, bring it over. You can see immediately made changes to the video. Those aren't exactly the changes we want to make, so let's go ahead and adjust them a little bit. You can see we have quite a few choices here to work with, but I'll show you what I normally use. First of all, I usually go to the effect mix. It's at 100 right now. Sometimes that's good, but you're going to want to probably look at that and change it a little bit to something that's good for your particular taste in your video. I usually like somewhere around 55 works for me on most of my videos. And again, let's look at the change that we get from 100 down to 55. So there's quite a bit of change in there. And you can see more detail on this after just putting the HDR on. I normally go down and look at the soften adjustment parameter. And I'll usually bring that up just a little bit. You can bring it all the way up. It's all about what you like to look at, what kind of story you're trying to tell. I usually like to have it right around 20%. And then it has some color controls. So if you need to turn your gamma up, if it's a little up or down. In this case, I kind of like it just the way it was, so I'm not going to change that. And you can change your contrast. And saturation is probably the next thing you want to do. And this will saturate your colors just a little bit more. And maybe bring out the details just a little bit more. We can change the highs range and the shadows. But I think we're about where we want on this, using maybe bring the contrast down just a little bit. And then change the contrast shift. Remember, it's all about what you're looking to create. If it looks good to you, then that's what matters. Alright, so this is what we've got now. This is what we had, and this is what we have now. So that's the HDR plugin. Let's look at the finishing plugin. We'll drop a new clip down here. Let's look for the finishing plugin. There it is. Let's pull it over. much, and you have a lot of different color controls in here. If you notice, there's a few that actually like saturation. They kind of overlap with the HDR plugin, and that's okay. I usually use the HDR plugin to bring out the detail, and then use the finishing plugin to bring out the color. But we're going to use them separately first, and then we'll try to put them together and see how that goes. So again, this clip is kind of flat, and you don't have a lot of detail in it. First thing you want to look at is probably brightness. It's the first thing I usually look at. Up and down, get it to where it's pleasing to your eyes. Exposure, again, I think I like the exposure the way it is on this one. You turn it up or turn it down, but it's pretty much all right. Now, vibrancy is one that I almost always have to use and like to use when I'm using Protune. If you turn the vibrancy up of all, you see a big change in the color. It actually brings out a lot of the color that is embedded in the file that GoPro puts in it. And then you can change the depth. I usually look at that. Maybe bring the details up a little bit. You can soften. And then saturate your colors just a little bit more. And there we go. And there's other settings too that you can look at and play with. But I kind of like it the way it looks right there. Now you can go really overboard and saturate it. Make it high saturation. And that will definitely give you a lot of color. And if you like that, that's fine. It doesn't necessarily look real, but then again, you're the artist and you're creating it. Let's take it back a little bit to where we get some color, but not too much. Now let's see what it looks like without it. Remember, it looked like this. And now it looks like this. Big difference. And of course, you can play with it so that it looks good for you. Now let's try using the finishing plugin with the HDRs. Let's go back to the one that we just did the HDR on. Now let's grab the finishing plugin. And I often use these two together. Now here are all of our settings for the finishing plugin. We can change the brightness. Maybe turn it up a little bit. Turn the vibrancy up just a tad. And then we can turn the shadows up a little bit. A little more detail maybe. And of course you want to highlight just your highs. You can saturate them a little more. Or your lows. But in this case, I want to just go ahead and saturate all the color just a little bit. And I think that looks pretty good. So here's what it looked like with just HDR. And here's what it looked like originally without either. Here's what it looks like with just the finishing. And then with both. That's pretty much it for these two plugins. They're really my favorite two plugins, and I pretty much use them on every Protune video that I use. And again, remember, you may not like the colorization that I'm showing here, but it is just for example, and you need to make your videos look the way you want. Remember, you're telling the story.